we are the rest of this year and change from the start of, supposedly, the start of the rollback of the golf ball. Now, the thinking behind it was that the distances that the best players in the world are hitting the golf ball is going to make golf courses, great golf courses, obsolete. And so the USGA and the R&A said when they first came out with all this that they want to rein in the technology forward-thinking 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road for the protection of the game of golf. And I think that's frankly, I think that's a good cause. And this is coming from a guy from the equipment side of the business. That was my background. That's what I did. But I do think that from the standpoint of looking forward, two things. One, they should have that perspective to protect the game in terms of technological advancements. And two, they also should be honest with the fact that the USGA and the R&A were the governing bodies who govern equipment. And so if equipment has, gotten out of hand, they're the ones that let the horse out of the barn. But, and I don't think they deny that. That wasn't why I mentioned it that way. It's just those two factors, I think, go hand in hand. And I think that brought us to where we are now, which I'm going to try to define for you. The USGA and the R&A initially said that what they call recreational golfers will not be impacted by the rollback of the golf ball, a reduced distance golf ball. Then they opened it up to essentially discussion period from everybody, but primarily it tends to go to what they call stakeholders. Right? Stakeholders are equipment companies that make golf balls or otherwise, big other governing bodies, PGA of America, the PGA Tour, Augusta National, et cetera, right? So you get where I'm going with all of that. So they came back and said through that period of soliciting opinions from others, they came back and said, nope, we think that having a standard set of rules was one of the reasons that they came back and said, no, everybody should be impacted by this. So if that's the case, take a look at this chart in that the USGA and the R&A are telling us that the average elite player will be impacted by 9 to 11 yards. The average elite female, 5 to 7 yards. The average male amateur or recreational golfer, as they were saying in their video releases and interviews we've done of the same, 3 to 5 yards. And the average female amateur, 1 to 3 yards. So that's what we're hearing. Again, from my standpoint, my first perspective on this is because people would immediately assume that given my background enthusiasm for equipment, that I'm against the objectives. I'm not against the objectives. I support the objectives for the long-term health of the game to slow down the advancement of equipment. For one reason being that I think that the design engineers are so good that they will continue to innovate, and I do believe that golf equipment will continue to get better and better and better. Part of that is the realization, folks, that improvement from one year to the next in golf equipment is always incremental. It's rare that there is a technological leap from one year to the next that's revolutionary. So it's an incremental increase. So that a lot of times people will ask me, how often should I change, for example, your irons, your set of irons, just as one element of your bag, right? The average is about 3 years in the industry, and I would say that average is about right. 3 to 5 years would be what I would say for most people. Because from the irons that you have, if they're 3 to 5 years old and you go to new irons with new technology and you get properly fit and tested and vetted, you will see an advantage in your performance. You'll likely see more distance, and there's a whole variety of reasons I get into that relate to that. But again, it's incremental distance, but it's going to be more than what you were getting 3 to 5 years ago if you're properly fit. And that fitting goes to everything, including golf shafts, et cetera, et cetera. It could be the Newton shafts that we're talking about. So this golf ball, though, and this approach, my sense is, just being completely honest with you guys, is that the move to reduce the distance of the golf ball because of what the best players in the world are doing. We're talking about less than 1% of all those who hit a ball with a club that play this game. But what they're doing is, in the eyes of golf's governing bodies, profound enough to say, no, we need to take action. We need to take action right now. So I believe what they did was they have moved forward, my opinion now, they have moved forward in putting restrictions in place that are scheduled based upon a philosophy, which I reiterate again, the long-term impact of that philosophy I do support. However, I don't believe that the move that they've made as yet is based upon sound science. Reason being is this. Someone could say, whoa, 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 you don't know the details of the proposed reduced distance golf ball. And I would agree with you. I don't. Now, let me ask you a question. If someone in my position that is literally an equipment and business reporter doesn't know, is that not a problem? I don't mean it from an entitled standpoint. I mean it from the standpoint of going, you've put in a deadline and said it's going to get reduced with the elite players first, and then it's going to get reduced with everybody else next. That's in place. But none of us know what the golf ball is. So when we look at that chart once again that claims that the top elite players, the males I'm going to concentrate on now for a second if you'll allow, will only lose 9 to 11 yards, and the average male player will lose 3 to 5 yards, how do you know? Unless you've done wide-scale testing, unless you know the physics, because let me explain to you for a second how this would work. If you are going to have a golf ball that has reduced distance for the best in the game and less reduced distance for the rest of the game, then the way that you accomplish that is what you do with the core of the golf ball. You make that core softer. And in making the core softer for the best of the best, it starts to have, I don't know how else to phrase it to you, but because we're talking visually here, it starts to have what I call a marshmallow effect. However, when you're talking about the rest, the softer core is going to benefit them because they're able to more easily compress the golf ball, and the golf ball is subject to the laws of physics, and the laws of physics is that it will want to rocket back to form because all golf balls are made out of compounds of rubber. The problem is that even if you are the average amateur golfer, the array, and remember, the average amateur golfer is generally defined by score. It's generally defined by handicap range. Within the same handicap range, I'm going to give you an average of 15. You can have people that can swing the golf club, generally younger, generally stronger, 105, 110 miles per hour. It's a lot. Now, it's going off the earth, but they can do it. At the same time, you're going to have the majority of the game, right? Demographics of the game, mid-40s and up. They're not going to have as fast a club head speed. But what I'm getting at is you're going to have people that are caught in the middle where they can impact and affect the technology where it's going to throw off those averages, so I don't even know where they come from. The basic message that I'm hearing when it comes to yardage lost for the average amateur golfer comes down to, frankly, you're not good enough to really impact the yardage that you otherwise would get. I'm not buying that. I've talked to the presidents of multiple companies who have said, well, no, that's not the case. If you're fit into the right golf ball, you're going to find a golf ball that performs for you. And the idea that with a brush of the hand to say, don't worry about it. Just move the tee boxes up. Again, I came from the golf course operations side of the game, too. I came from that green grass side. You go to most golf courses. Go to your course as soon as the weather allows. And look where your tees are that you're playing and tell me if you have room to move your tees up 20 feet. Some of you will. The vast majority won't. And then do the same thing at women's tees and tell me, can you move your women's tees up 20 feet? And I can assure you the vast majority cannot. That's a problem. Now we're talking about what are we going to do about these tee boxes? And then, because it could amount to, collectively for the game, millions and millions and millions of dollars in expense to rebuild tee boxes appropriately. Was that what this was all about? Right? I've heard the sustainability argument relative to this, and I reject that too, because when you talk about sustainability, you've got 16,000 golf courses in the United States that are already built. And the idea that, well, now you don't have to water as much, so it uses less water, this is a sustainability benefit. What are you going to do? Not water your back tees now? So that issue exists. The other part that no one ever talks about is, if you lose distance off the driver, you are also going to lose distance off your 3-wood, your 5-wood, your hybrids, your irons, your wedges. You're going to lose it on every club you hit for the rest of the hole. Again, for the elite players, for the best of best, generally doesn't really matter very much. Or does it? So this article by Adam Schupak from the PGA Tour quoted multiple players about the impact because the PGA Tour is doing their own testing. Brian Harman said, I think it's a bad idea. I can't get on board. There are so many steps we can make to mitigate distance, golf course setup, driver setup before you force companies and R&D to a bunch of things. He's talking about testing the shorter distance golf ball. I hit it a lot shorter. The farther you hit it, the less you are affected by the first version of the golf ball. It's the first version, but that was the finding. Okay, you could see his quote continues. You can read it if you're with us on the television side. This goes to what I've been talking about all along. Philosophy does not define uniform reduction in distance. That is defined by physics. And the outbound distance of a golf ball, regardless of core composition, is always going to be predominantly defined by the inbound velocity of the club. You can define COR, coefficient of restitution, at 0.82 and change. You can do that and say only 82% of the energy coming in can be forced out. I get that. You can do that. And maybe that's a place where they could have looked, at least for an elite player. But if you're going to find a ball that you said, no, this works for everybody, and for those of you that really aren't that great, you're not going to see much of a change. Really? But for those of you that are great, you're all going to lose a very similar percentage. You can't do that, in my view. So again, and I'll keep going with these. Ben Griffin weighed in on it too. So slide these in there, Andrew, as you see fit. They wanted feedback on what we felt different in the golf ball. Let's just say it was pretty easy to notice which balls were part of the rollback. It definitely comes out of the air faster, but it still didn't curve as much because I think the technology of the club's so much better. It will affect low ball hitters the most. Tony Finau, Rory McIlroy won't experience a big difference compared to someone like Brian Harman, who relies on more roll. Lucas Glover was one of the first to weigh in on it. It's not a way to grow the game to have people hit it shorter. It's stupid and reactive like everything else. The USGA and the R&A never get ahead of anything, and then they need to do something drastic on the back end to make up for it. They are breaking the world record in 100 meters. They don't make it 110. Guys are shooting three-pointers better. They don't move the line back. They haven't made the goalpost narrower when field goal kickers got better. This might be the time that the Tour and the PGA of America say, we're out. It would be nice if somebody took a stand for us for a change. Maybe this could be the opportunity for the Tour to do that, close quote. Those were 3 PGA Tour players that you heard from, 2 of whom are major champions. And here's Lucas Glover saying, you know, it'd be nice if someone took a stand for us once in a while. They have a tour to take a stand for them, right? The PGA of America, Derek Sprague, the new CEO, has already said he's against this, right? My question is, who's taking a stand for you guys? My question is, why do you have to give up distance because the best in the world have to figure out a way to slow down technology, of which I support that. But why you? Why do you have to make the sacrifice for them? Is it for commercial reasons? Is this really about money? I thought this was about for the best of the game. If it is about the latter, then what I believe we need is a lot more testing. Instead of giving us a deadline and going, boom, right here is where it's going to change. Definitive. Right? Dom's going to give us a date in a second. He's in my headset saying he has them. Fine. But because I want to get an update on our question of the day, which is, do you support a rollback, yes or no? But the question is this: why should you have to give up distance when you, Mr. and Mrs. Recreational Golfer, are already distance challenged? Why at a time when the game is booming and the 99% of the game of the people who actually pay for everybody else at the professional level to enjoy what they have in their lifestyle? Why do you have to make the payment of losing distance when distance is the one thing you need more than anything else in your golf game? All right, Dom, go ahead and you can give me the dates, and please give us an update on your question of the day.
Sure. The official dates are January 2028. That's when it take effect for professional golfers. January of 2030 is when it takes effect for absolutely everybody. So they have a couple transition years in there where if you're playing recreationally or in a little tournament near you, you can use a non-conforming golf ball for a couple years before it takes effect in 2030. The official question of the day was, do you support a golf ball rollback? Yes or no? 67%, Matt, are saying a hard no right now. And I'll just read, again, there's obviously a wide array of comments coming, and I'll just read a handful of them. There's a lot of people commenting, as you would imagine. Derek writes, it's ridiculous changing the ball because 0.001% of players. This whole thing is ridiculous. Manesh writes, I don't know why they need to change the ball. Why don't they just change the CC of the driver or maybe do something with the COR? Matt, you mentioned that briefly earlier. Maybe there are other territories they could be looking into to make some adjustments if they feel it's necessary. Why don't they just, Ted writes, why don't they just do bifurcation already? This whole thing is stupid. Michael says, as a senior golfer, I need all the help I can get. Please, no, don't do this.
All right, so
I mean, there's plenty more, Matt, but there's a lot going on around this topic. We could do 20 shows on this,
and we probably have, to tell you the truth. Here's what this comes down to, and you do not hear a lot of people talking about this. The reason being is because of the relationships with golf's governing bodies. That's the truth. Right? And so what I'm trying to say to you guys is that this is not simply lightning bolts being tossed between the gods. This is something that will affect 100% of the people that play the game of golf based upon what they have set in stone right now. The question is, can that be chiseled out? Can further testing be done? What impact will happen when two of those so-called golfing gods at the top of golf's, as they like to say, ecosystem, the PGA Tour and the PGA of America, don't seem to be too crazy about this idea. Now, the PGA Tour has not come out with a hard decision or position against it. We're reading into what the members of the PGA Tour are saying. The PGA of America, however, who represent 30,000 PGA professionals who govern the game from coast to coast, has come out in the person of Derek Sprague and said, I don't know about this. All I'm saying to you guys is, please be engaged, because my question continues the same all the time. When you have golf's ecosystem, who speaks for you? Who represents you? Who looks out for your best interest? Because you guys are the ones that are behind all the rest. The percentages make sense. You represent 99.9% of the game.
Well, you do believe something should take place
Yeah.
to rein in distance long term.
Yes.
You don't believe that what's happening right now is really the way to do it.
No.
My question isn't how do you do it? My question is what is the least impactful way to make that change?
Bifurcate.
Is it golf course? Is it golf ball?
Bifurcate. It just if you're here, you got to understand the different elements.
Yeah, but that's not least impactful because then the golf ball companies have to make like way more golf balls and
if
do them
it's about
separately.
commerce, it's about commerce. We need to be honest about that. That's not what anyone is saying. They're telling us it's about how much water you use, et cetera, et cetera. But okay, fine. So here's the different elements to it. The best players in the world are saying that it can be accomplished, reining in distance can be accomplished by the way that you set up the golf courses, et cetera, right? Which is true, longer rough, et cetera, but if golf technology continues to develop and so there's less what they call MOI, which stands for moment of inertia, which means less oscillation at the moment of impact, so that the ball flies straighter, you're going to have more people hitting the fairway, and maybe you can crimp it in a little bit and put bunkers out there or have run out in fairways where you can only hit it 310 or 320 and there's no fairway after that. It's rough or whatever. You could do all those things, right? But that doesn't really impact the fact that the players at the top tier are hitting it longer. You can disagree with me that that's something that you need to be concerned with, but to me, that's a separate argument, and it's a lot easier argument to have because one way or another, the best players in the world are going to figure it out. They can figure out by saying, we are the elite and the best players in the world. Thank you very much. We're going to live to our own standards. Leave us alone. They could do that if they want to. Or they could acquiesce and actually have reductions in the distance, but maybe that reduction is going to come from things like more spin on the golf ball. So if you hit it off the center, the harder you hit it, the harder it is to hit it in the center of the club face. Maybe that's a good way to balance it. There are other things. And some of those comments that you were reading before the break, Dom, speak to there are other things that can be done. That's why I said with where they are right now, it sounds to me like it was a lot more about a philosophy, an ideology, than it was about the science, because I don't think the science has been fully vetted yet, as evidenced by the fact that we just had this Golf Week article going, some PGA Tour players are testing the new proposed golf ball, and they're getting very poor results. They're not getting a uniform reduction of distance for all professional players, regardless. They're getting, shockingly, exactly what we expected. Physics is kicking in. And depending upon how fast your club head speed is, how fast your ball speed normally is coming off that face, it goes back to this, very simply, the longest players are still going to be the longest players. And they're still going to have the advantage of being the longest players. Will it cost them a club? Maybe. So what are we talking now? A wedge to a 9-iron? But a player that was coming in with a 7-iron is going to move now, to a 6, maybe a 5? It's going to have a dramatic difference. But again, that's their world. They'll figure that out. They are well represented for people to speak for them, as evidenced by the fact that they're actually doing testing. My concern is, what about everybody else? Who's doing testing for everybody else, the other 99 point plus percent?
Is the only reason, Matt, to impact us, the amateurs, is because they want one set of rules? Is that the only reason that they're doing this to all the amateurs?
I believe that the reason is commercial. You mean
it's too expensive for the golf ball manufacturers because it's complicated with all the number of golf balls they've got to make?
It's about aspiration. They want John Q. Public sitting at home on the couch to say, I want to play the golf ball that XYZ player's playing. Look how well he plays that. Look how well he hits it. So it's ultimately golf equipment has always had an element within in the sale of golf equipment, any piece, golf balls or otherwise, there is an element of hope. Always. This hope that this club is going to be your deliverance in some way or another. And so my personal belief is that what's the snare in all of this from initially telling us, no, it's not going to represent recreational golfers. They don't need to hit it shorter. They need to hit it longer. Until now when we're told, oh, yeah, we got the feedback, and everybody thinks it should be one set of rules. Is there an element? What I was saying, Don, wait a minute. What I was saying was this is not being proposed as like a change to golf's constitution, if you will. This is still a modified local rule. So a modified local rule is like, it's like an executive order where you're saying, yeah, this is the rule. This is the rule, but it's not in the full structure of the rule book yet. It's a modified local rule, which means it's an adoption of a rule, if that makes sense to you. So it's a soft way of making something very, very dramatic happen in the game of golf. And my issue goes down to the same thing. If you're telling us that there's science out there that can have a minimal impact on recreational golfers, which I don't think 3 to 5 yards is minimal impact. Not when you're talking about it. People hear that, and again, they always think just in terms of the driver. Like after that, it's over. Oh, we're okay. We moved our tee boxes up. Did you have room? Yeah, we had room. We moved our tee box up. Good for you. So you made up for it. Now what do? The majority of amateurs are coming in with long clubs into par fours. The majority. So if you're amongst the lucky that can play it with a 7 or an 8 iron the way a lot of architects design, that's not what most people do. Most people are coming in with hybrids. Some of them with 5 woods, some of them with 3 woods. Now what are you going to do? Because that distance reduction continues throughout the entire bag. Nobody talks about that. Right? So in answer to your question, that's the reason why I said you want the easiest solution, bifurcate it. If you don't want the easiest solution, then in my opinion, you have to spend the next few years doing broad-scale testing and get real data so that you can try to narrow it down to the best product. And then remember the fact that in the game of golf, whether you admit it or not, this idea that there's one set of rules that are sacrosanct for all, the game of golf is already bifurcated. Do you play the same tees as the best players in the world? That's a bifurcation. Do you play the exact same equipment as they do? That's a bifurcation. Do you benefit from handicaps that they can't use in their competitions? That's a bifurcation. Whether you like it or not, what I'm saying is there's 2 sets of rules of how people play. Now, if you want to get into how so-called recreational golfers, because that was the definition that they used, if you want to get into how recreational golfers play the game compared to the best players in the world, the vast majority of those that hit a ball OB will drop it where it crossed. Can't do that in a professional game. You're 3 feet away. Pick it up. That's good. Can't do that in a professional game. Dom pops it out of a divot in the fairway. Can't do that in a professional game. What I'm saying to you is that we are worlds apart from what they do at the top elite level. So spare me this idea that the rules are so sacrosanct that they cannot be touched because we all have to play by the same rules. We don't right now.